Can you hear us?
If this isn't working,
hear us.
We're quitting. We're walking out of here.
Tana's going to LA. If this doesn't work, guys, it's really important.
Try something else with my life.
It seems like the sound's working because that green bar's going up and down.
Well, great. How fun it is to be here. Now we're just speaking into the void.
Love when we lose all of our energy on a dud live stream.
We had a great intro, we don't always nail the intro, but that time we did.
We did nail the intro. God. What did we even talk about?
We talked about your amazing advancements as a human being, speaking at Thrive.
Yes.
Training for a half marathon.
Yeah, we were talking about how we're doing a live this week because I don't have time to edit because I'm keynote speaking at Thrive on Friday. My biggest public fear is public speaking. I hate public speaking. But, just facing that for the ex-Mormon community and money and prestige. And I'm also training for a half marathon despite hating running. It was all funny the first time we said all this. So now it just feels braggy and lame. But yeah, might throw up on Friday, might do a good job. It's really just the leap of faith space that you got to be willing to plunge yourself into to get anywhere in life.
I think you should throw them a curveball, try to make everybody uncomfortable to really drive home some hard lessons.
Yeah, like confront your own shadow side by cringing at me.
Commandeer John's podium. And you have all been dosed with MDMA.
Look under your seats. There's a blankie. Yeah, I don't know. The thing about public speaking is, if you're someone who hates, I feel like I've tried to have this conversation with some of my friends who are very good at public speaking. Like, you are amazing at public speaking. Cara is very good at public speaking. Use candy bars in your presentation. Genius.
Michael Scott core.
I just think Michael Scott core. I just think people that are good at public speaking, as much as I'm sure you still get a bit nervous, right? I don't think you can grasp the level of nervous system regulation. So my entire plan has to be themed around the fact that my brain could go completely blank, stupider than blank even. Mm-hmm. So I have to be prepped for just a complete shutdown of all vital functions. The brain is the last.
What's your emergency go-to in that situation?
Well,
I start dancing. Maybe throw off a shirt.
It's scripting. And then obviously that. Yeah.
I gotta owe it to my Mormon upbringing, having a dad as a bishop. Anytime there was a speaker who canceled or minutes to go in the meeting, my dad would just be like, "Now we'll hear from Tanner Gilliland," and I'd be like, "Oh, okay."
And you're like,
but.
Well, I do feel if you're forced to do it from a really young age, and also when you're younger, people are nicer to you about things. I was listening to Seth Rogen's audiobook, and he started doing stand-up when he was 11. So he would go to these showcases or whatever with adults. And so obviously if you're an 11-year-old cute boy doing stand-up, you're going to get tons of validation.
Yeah.
So I think that's the trick with stuff like public speaking is start doing it early enough that everyone will be excessively nice to you. So your nervous system gets really comfortable with it at a really young age and decides that you're good at a really young age.
Isn't that how it all works? It's we do art because we were told we were good at it. We do whatever because we we're good at it.
Yeah.
We should just let everyone try everything and tell them to keep doing the things that make them happy.
I remember
public speaking.
One time I applied to be my school because I liked writing, and I applied to, it was through an English class where I applied to be my school's representative for this public speaking competition. And I remember thinking I had the best speech. I went in for the audition, right, with just 2 English teachers. Mm-hmm. And I was I'm going to nail this. I'm the best in the class at English. I'm obviously going to get this. And I had written a speech about climate change. And then as I was delivering the speech, I became aware, loosely, because I was still 13, that my teachers were I had such a Nazi energy in how I was talking about climate change, because that's just what I thought a firm speech
was. The corporations are killing the world.
No,
we must rise up.
It was genuinely Dwight Schrute when he has to give a speech at I just went way too bit in my mind.
ExxonMobil must burn.
It was righteous indignation, I was talking about climate change. Anyway, the girl who ended up getting it, and I think winning the competition, was cute and did a thing on healthy eating and bit into an apple, and just much more pleasing to look at than some weird Nazi 13-year-old.
They just weren't. If that would be today, you'd be the Greta Thunberg of the world, but
I'm not sure about that. It was more aggressive than Greta Thunberg is.
Oh, wow.
It was just
Maybe we need it.
insufferable. It was insufferable. Anyway, speaking of insufferable, today we are going to be reading Elder Oaks' recent devotional to young adults.
I can't wait to hear what this not so young adult has to say to people in this generation with whom he could not possibly relate.
Also, why does that look like they're doing a Broadway show?
It kind of
Just
does.
the vibe of that photo.
Yeah.
What I know about this talk, having not read it yet, is that he basically told young adults to rush into marriage. And I just think that's funny because I feel like we always talk about how at BYU Idaho, apostles would come and encourage everyone to rush into marriage, regardless of money, regardless of all this stuff. And I kind of was under the impression that they wouldn't dare to utter those kinds of messages anymore.
Oh, I think they have to. I think they have to.
Yeah, otherwise people leave the church.
Yeah, they have to lock people in as quickly as possible, get them so financially, socially strapped down and reliant on the church for their, the semblance of peace and purpose and community. That's the only way. Like, it's literally the only way to keep people so busy raising kids and doing their church callings and things that they never even have time to think about anything or question anything.
Mm-hmm.
That's my take on it. That's nothing against parenting or marriage in general. That's just why I think the church is always pushing it, and why conservative institutions are pushing that so much, because they realize they're a dying ideology. Like, they can't withstand 2 more generations of TikTok discourse, because anyone with half a brain and half a heart is going to see right through it all. And so all they have to do is just keep clenching down, they make some compromises in some way. Oh, now people can have earrings. Now people can have tattoos.
Really cool.
See how lenient and
really
cool and hip and modern we are? Don't judge, but also don't get one.
Camera skewed. I'm honestly
a little
can't
bit.
be bothered to care. But
I
think it's the way it's on. Who cares? By the way, this, like every live stream we do, is a fundraising live stream. We're always trying to fundraise for this channel that is not paying our bills. You can send us super chats, but if you don't want to do super chat because YouTube takes, I think, almost a third, quite a big chunk, to be honest. Our Venmo link is in the description box, and we love you so much, and please help. And also, just thanks for being here if you don't want to give us money.
This rant brought to you by our Patreon subscribers. Thank you so much.
Yeah. We're filming a Stephanie after this, so you should also join us on Patreon.
I'm dressed like I do coke just for the occasion.
Just for Stephanie.
Just for it's crankcore.
Yeah. We are crankcore.
But I was just going to say, I feel like that's the aim of fundamentalist institutions generally. And they have a point that, like, the people who are going to keep breeding while the rest of us enjoy life and try to, reduce our carbon footprint, however frauded the concept is, and, just try letting go of so much of the traditional models of life where you just live to be a consumer, working at a desk job, popping out so that you can support your endless brood of children who may grow up in any kind of terrible circumstances. But as long as they're brought into the world, then you're doing your job in the eyes of God and for the economy. And they will inherit the earth, unfortunately. They're going to keep outbreeding sensible people, unfortunately. The sad fact about
that is they are going to move forward with inheriting the earth.
Yeah. But nevertheless, we persist. Should we read what he has to say about this all?
Is he the president of the Quorum of the 12?
He is the first counselor to President Nelson right now.
Oh, so he's but you're still called an apostle if you're in the first president. So there's actually more than 12 apostles?
Yes, there's 15.
There's 15 apostles.
Yeah, there's 12, and then there's the presidency of the 3, and I believe that the president is the actual, or it's the oldest person is the president of the Quorum of 12.
Yeah, very cool.
There's some intense lore there, okay, that you really got to look into.
It's an innovation station. So we are reading from because we still haven't, though we have some new equipment, we haven't figured out how to stream videos with you guys yet. So we're going to be reading the Church News's recap of what was said in this devotional, which we've had a little look, and it does seem decently comprehensive. Thank you, Rachel, for the super chat.
Thanks, Rachel.
Presumably from the UK. Love that. Well,
in a devotional broadcast to 18 to 30-year-olds across the globe on Sunday, May 21st, President Oaks and his wife, Sister Kristen M. Oaks, offered loving counsel for young adults regarding marriage and dating.
I love when 90-year-old men give me dating advice.
Yeah.
There's no one else.
It's exactly the same world and dating landscape out there today as it was 1,000 years ago when President Oaks was a child. President Oaks' instruction also included counsel about how to stand fast with love while proclaiming truth, something that he has the corner and the market on, and which nobody else does, including on issues involving gender dysphoria and being romantically attracted to persons of the same sex. Can't wait.
I thought it was interesting phrasing that they said romantically attracted, like nothing about sexually attracted.
Right.
Thank you, Stephen, for the Venmo super chat, which we will read too, because we really appreciate you.
Thanks, Stephen.
Thank you so much.
I think that is interesting. It's something that I've been thinking about particularly because, of course, across the board in church, breaking the law of chastity is a sin for everyone, whether you're gay, straight, or somewhere in between. And yet, queer members are punished disproportionately because all interaction with members of the same sex is seen as evil, which is a really anti-human perspective. I think it's not fair, it's not just, it's not kind, it's not based in science, it's not good. It's just discrimination, but they justify it saying, well, it's this horrible thing. They're having to ease their stance now because there's just too much science and evidence and social persuasion to try to persist in just outright homophobia. So when the question comes of well, what about people who are just interested romantically? Because we know people at BYU Idaho who were kicked out of school, not for breaking the law of chastity, but just for acting on their gay romantic feelings, holding hands with a boy, kissing a boy, or whatever. And it's crazy because they lose their accreditation. Those credits from BYU Idaho don't transfer to other schools unless you transfer with a degree and associates or something. And so people were just losing their whole academic everything that they've worked on for years.
Hands.
Yeah.
And it's such a Bishop Roulette thing as well, because there would be people that would hold hands with someone of the same sex and not get kicked out. Some people would. I just think it's interesting because he's talking about standing fast with love. And if we just remove sexuality from the equation and we just think about romantic attraction to persons of the same sex, what is romance? It's really just it's like a higher than average admiration for the ways that another person is, or fascination, a delight, a desire to be around them and to soak them up. Those are very pure, innocent things that are part of the spectrum of love. And I just think it's really just the idea that you can fragment entire sections of the love spectrum, whatever you want to call it, and be that's not loving, even though but it is that is what love is yes. Attention and curiosity and wonder and admiration. But then to say that it's loving to shut those feelings down in yourself and to put someone at a distance, I don't know.
That's one thing to do that to yourself. How could it possibly be considered a loving thing to require somebody else to do that because it makes you uncomfortable? These brethren, Boyd K. Packer, famous homophobe, said that it's an essential facet of our joy in this life to be closely romantically connected with other people. And if you're not fulfilled with people of the opposite gender from which you were assigned, then what he's saying is you're not entitled to the fundamental experience of being a human on planet Earth.
Yeah.
And that's ridiculous. And to again, if you choose that of your own being, do whatever you want. But to say other people aren't allowed to experience that because it makes me uncomfy because I just refuse to learn anything that wasn't written down in the Iron Age.
This is the thing that the church, as much as the church tries to upgrade its rhetoric to become less homophobic, not saying Elder Oaks has necessarily done that, but you just can't get away from the fact that everything in Mormonism is geared towards people getting married and having romantic monogamous partnership. That's in modern Mormonism, that's the thing, that's the whole point of life. And you're just telling people you don't get to do that. We don't really know what else you can be doing, just kind of enduring to the end.
But look forward to the day someday you'll be dead and then you'll be happy.
Then you'll be straight.
Now you understand why a lot of
nice.
I mean, that is the mentality that pushes a lot of queer people to the edge, just being well, I'm miserable in this life, going against my nature, the way that, God, or however you want to frame it, created me, the way that I was spat out into this world. I'm supposed to resist that and fight against that and demonize my own self and treat myself as this hostile attacking force rather than just loving and accepting the way that I am, the way that I was created. what else am I supposed to do but be like, well, then I guess I'd rather be dead. I guess, if the celestial kingdom is so good that you'd kill yourself to get there, well, that sounds better than here. And that's what it's been like for queer members in the church for the last 200 years.
Yeah, there's still no more of a plan for them than there used to be. It's still just as grim. And, the church can, again, upgrade its rhetoric, but it's like fundamentally homophobic to say that, gay people don't get to have partners in this life. Like, you can't get away from that. You hear Mormons say, like, they have the same rules as straight people. If straight people break the law of chastity, they get kicked out of school too. And it's like, but it's really not the same. Like, it's very different. It's kind of like when you're on a really long hike and you're out of water versus when you're on a really long hike and you're choosing not to drink from your water because you need to conserve it because you have it feels a lot better to not take a drink from water that you actually have than to not be able to drink water at all. Do you know what I'm saying?
Yeah,
Is that a bad metaphor? I don't know. I'm just saying, like, just staring down the barrel of an entire lifetime without that to look forward to, when like everything in your body is geared towards like you wanting that, because we are human.
It's funny, these guys used to teach that homosexuality was a sin, a temptation, an addiction like any other, and that it was something that could be chosen, opted into, or opted out of. And Dallin H. Oaks himself, under his leadership at BYU, where he was president, they practiced gay conversion therapy, which was proven to both be ineffective and traumatic to the participants. Of course, Elder Oaks went on to lie about his participation, even though we have receipts showing that he was well aware. So this guy does not have a good history of being honest, does not have a good history of being an ally. Like, he's the one who said, how could we allow for homosexuals to, we should discriminate their appearance in the public sphere anywhere that their values are being influential in the media, in the news. Like, we shouldn't have gay people allowed to present in public. They shouldn't be here. He wants us to disappear. And then saying, like, somehow allowing us to just be and exist and have jobs and families and lives he said it's equated to national suicide. That then we won't have any kids. Everyone will just become gay. It's this addiction, this virus that everyone will just catch, and then no one will have babies, and then this country will just fall apart. And it's like, how dumb do you have to believe that? How did you sit on the Utah Supreme Court for decades and you're still that dumb?
On that, yeah.
I don't, like, literally, that is really stupid.
If you haven't watched our Lying for the Lord video, I feel like we dived a little bit into it. It is insane. The level of lying there are 4 receipts for him doing when he was on the Utah Supreme Court. It blows my mind. I just want to say thank you to those of you who have Venmo'd us in lieu of Super Chats. If you just joined, we also accept Venmo's as Super Chats because YouTube takes some of the money from Super Chats. So thank you to the Dance Box, who said, thanks for existing for Exmo Millennials. Thank you so much. Jared said, thanks for the deconstruction help. Yay.
Thank you.
And Michelle Zelf, thank you so much.
Venmo,
we need
donors get a blown kiss. What?
Oh yeah, donors get a blown kiss. Also, Tanner will do any impression you want if you Venmo us. As you can see, he's very good at impressions. All right, what else is he saying?
Heavenly Father has a plan for his.
Wait, where are you?
Should I read it in his voice? So down past this part here.
Well, I'm on this bit. President Oaks shared the promise found in 1 Nephi, for he that diligently seeketh shall find, and the mysteries of God shall be unfolded unto them by the power of the Holy Ghost. So I'm like,
not according to the New Church historian, who says that seeking for answers is not the way to do it.
And you need to scale it back. Yes, yeah. So true. Another one of our videos, if you haven't seen it, very interesting. Also, I'm like, gay members of the church, there's really, they can seek as much as they want. What are they going to find? Endure to the end. That's it.
Yeah. They're going to say, we're not in cahoots enough with God to find out. That's the thing. These people are supposed to be like walking and talking with Jesus Christ. They're supposed to be getting direct revelation from him, better than anybody on earth. They're like God's antenna, getting direct revelation. Itself. And they're just like, I don't know. Keep praying, paying, and obeying. I promise that'll keep working out for you.
Marriage is central to the purpose of mortal life and what follows, President Oaks noted. And the power of creation is one of the most precious gifts of mortal life.
Just want to say the whole concept of marriage is just so fraught. Like, pretending that the marriage of the Old Testament is the same as marriage in the New Testament or various accounts in the Old Testament itself, because the scriptures don't speak with one single unified voice. LDS scholar Dan McClellan has gone into this at length. You should check out his work. He's awesome.
Also, even marriage in the 90s versus now in Mormonism. I've looked at old Mormon books where they literally teach women to like always be pretty and dainty for your husband and never overwhelm him by talking about your day. Just ask him about his day. And that was just like the standard teachings of apostles back then.
Yeah. And like the fact that marriage initially started out as a way of like transferring ownership of property, including women who were not seen as real people. They were like a subset. Remember, Eve was taken from the rib. She wasn't a real person. And to say that that was the plan of God, and that's exactly the way that marriage is structured today, and that we need to be following that same thing when there are like, that whole concept has changed so many times and is so culturally relative, so politically relative. Like, why is marriage an essential facet of, what did he say?
Mortal life and what follows.
Why? Like, why does your tax bracket have such a say in your life? Like, isn't, I'm responding to a different creator soon who's talking about biblical marriage. And he's like, see, the marriage that God instituted in the Garden of Eden is exactly why we need to have marriage today. And it's like, where was the government in the Garden of Eden? Where was the notary office? Who signed the papers? Who got the tax benefits? It's like, obviously, what you're talking about in the Old Testament is nothing like what we're talking about now. So stop pretending like they're the same thing.
Mm-hmm. Thank you to Hannah, who Venmoed us and said, fuck the patriarchy.
Hey.
Keychain on the ground. Also, just the idea that, I know that, never mind, whatever, let's just move on.
Central to that gift is the law of chastity, the commandment that powers or procreation be expressed only within marriage between a man and a woman.
Again, Adam and Eve did not sign the notary documents, so we
and
cannot.
They were doing incest.
They were doing incest too.
Arguably
also,
much worse.
If she was taken from his rib, then she would be his genetic clone. So he has sex with his clone. They have kids who have sex with each other, and that leads to all life on Earth. That's how it's all created. See,
it's all sounding a bit narcissistic.
Science.
Yeah, I know everyone's probably seen that meme. That's like the next time a man says you came from his rib, tell him it takes 9 months for a woman to grow that rib or a person.
So central is the law of chastity. That commandment is central to the gospel of Jesus Christ. Is it? Let's talk about the law of chastity. What are you talking about? You're talking about extramarital sex? Well, it doesn't seem that important when your prophets are exercising that. Oh, marriage between one man and one woman. You yourself are married to two different people. You believe that you'll be a polygamist in eternity. So don't lecture me about being a monogamous who has to be legally married in this life for my life to count or matter at all. Like, what are you talking about?
Mm-hmm. Where are you, by the way?
Right here.
Okay.
That reality explains why we have different values and refrain from certain behaviors that seem common among many around us, President Oakes said.
The gift of the law of chastity is why gay people aren't allowed to have romance.
Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah. Again, Jesus never said a single word about homosexuality. I think we should just note that right off the bat. For this thing that has taken up so much space, the fact that we have a book written for our day that doesn't even mention the most prominent issue of our day, I mean, the Book of Mormon is ridiculous. There's like a million reasons to disbelieve, but like the fact that we've got like coins and
little about anything
political
real.
Machination, like oversimplified political stories, like it's just dumb.
Yeah.
But the fact that it says nothing and that the representatives of Jesus Christ have nothing other than just keep trusting us, keep suppressing. We may change our minds, we may teach contradictory things at different times, but we can never lead you astray.
Oh, someone said their parents made me listen to this.
Oh my God.
That sucks. Also, thank you, Jared. We've got an impression request. And it is specific. Okay, this is a specific one, but I really believe you'll be able to do it. Elder Holland laying on the Cry Factory, talking about a really good cheeseburger.
And my dear brothers, I testify that cheeseburger was the one cheeseburger.
I don't know.
We're not supposed to be making fun of his jowls anymore.
That's true. That is making fun of someone's appearance, and I do apologize.
You have to pee so bad, did you say?
I do have to pee
Hey,
so
hurry
bad.
up. Go. I laughed so hard when Tana posted a picture of that outfit the other day and was like, proof that you don't have to do cocaine to look like this. Oh God, every time Tana leaves, it like becomes real to me that I'm just live streaming to hundreds of people and they're all watching me and I'm being perceived way more than I feel comfortable with. How's everyone doing? Banksy, do you want to come in and help me be less alone? He's not getting treats today from this live stream, so he's kind of less interested in being on camera. I figured loving your neighbor as yourself meant not going out of my way to make them miserable just because you would think. Also, Day is looking up with his elf live stream. That's so nice. Hey, say your piece. Say your little thing. People always leave, well, not always. We've just got a few comments about how when we make fun of Elder Holland's jowls, I mean, we are in the camp of don't make fun of people's appearances. Sometimes it's just so easy when you're punching up and his jowls just feel so specific to him. I can't think of anyone else with jowls like that. All right, he's back. Oh, thank God. Doesn't do coke. Can you believe? Thank you, Somers.
What'd I miss?
It wasn't my best work filling the time with you.
It's a lot of pressure to keep the live stream going alone.
Again, hate public speaking. That was me microdosing public speaking because it still doesn't feel fully like there's 154 people watching. I can kind of trick myself. Fellow Pimo sending tithes to you too.
Oh, thank you, Christopher.
You so much. Anyone who doesn't know, that's physically in, mentally out, right? So people that still go to church, but like emotionally they don't believe it. If it's all about procreative power, then should individuals who are infertile not be allowed to have any type of sex since it would be without a purpose?
Thank you.
You would think.
Thank you. Yeah. I feel like that's always the thing with anti-gay people is they're like,
also, you can't procreate. So it's like, how is it toying with that powers? You know what I'm saying?
Yeah. And right. It's not like you're going to misuse it. You just like,
you're not going to accidentally bring a baby into the world, which I would argue can be, toying with the sacred powers of procreation.
Absolutely. And we're going to get into this in a minute, but yeah, they always make it a thing about procreation. And it's like, okay, well then you have to at least admit that God, if you believe in God, you have to admit that God has literally created some people that are physically incapable of reproduction. Therefore, to assume that everybody needs to reproduce in order to have a valid life and to be in good standing with God is false, right? Because God has created people who don't fulfill that end. So what you can do is just let go of the judgment for anybody for not doing it, because you're like, okay, well, it's obviously not in God's mind that everybody has to do this. So why am I going to go out and impose that belief that everybody needs to be doing this? Otherwise, we're all going to... the fabric of society is going to unravel and everyone's going to go to hell because they're not having kids. It's like, God doesn't want everyone to have kids, obviously, or he would have made everybody able to have kids, but he didn't. So deal with it.
And there's just no sensible backing for the fact that straight married couples in Mormonism are allowed to have sex for pleasure. Mm-hmm. Like, God does recognize that sex for pleasure is valid and helps you feel love and, brings all these wonderful...
Yeah, these octogenarians, are you telling me that they're having sex just for pleasure and not reproduction? Is that what you're telling me? Or are they're keeping it tucked? I just sense a lot of hypocrisy.
I would just love to know, it's a bit grim to say, but like about the sexual activity of the higher ups of the church.
It's got to be fucking
I'm
grim.
like, how many decades ago did you completely shut off that part of yourself? I just struggle to believe that any of them have an ounce of joie de vivre in them.
No.
Anyway,
David A. Bednar.
He was the one I thought of because I was like, he seems young,
cold, robotic.
Unless that's the one place where he doesn't. Probably not, but you never know.
Those old patriarchal types who want everyone to worship the ground they walk on. Scary.
Leaders of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints are concerned about recent changes in the nature and extent of marriage in the United States. President Oaks showed two charts, one showing the reduction in the percentage of adults in the United States who marry, and the other showing the increase in the average age of church members who marry. Wow, so really hamming home that the average age shouldn't be going up.
Again, to make everything about, I know why the church does it. They have their whole celestial kingdom and temple marriage and but like, what does that have to do with the gospel of Jesus Christ? Honestly, like, That's supposed to be the central facet. Repentance, faith, baptism, salvation. Great, you've done it. But they've turned it into this whole thing like, if you're not in the right tax bracket in the United States of America, then you don't get to end up in the celestial kingdom with your lover. And the fact that people are waiting to get married, it's like, what does this have to do with anything about Jesus? What is in the Bible? What are you talking about?
Mm-hmm. I mean, to be fair, I know you keep talking about the tax bracket thing. If I was a Mormon, I'm just trying to think of my logic. I would have just been like, well, if it's a situation where you can't get married because of something, you can just do kind of like your own makeshift ceremony, and God will honor that. I was also a convert.
I mean, that's what I would say. That's what I would say is like, okay, let's do a little thought experiment. You're on a deserted island with another person. There is no government around. You two people are the government. Can you lawfully have sex? If you have, as the two citizens of that geographic region, you decide, hey, we're the government. We're going to have an official ceremony. Does that count? And if not, how is that different than a cartel taking over a geographic region, violently instituting their laws, and then 200 later they have this, system of taxation and things, and you adhere to that? Why is that better than two people just deciding? And if that works on a deserted island, why is that different than just two people who love each other and who are committed to each other? That's the thing. All this stuff is like, they are the Pharisees of the modern age. The Pharisees were the ones who sat in Moses' seat, meaning that they claimed institutional authority. They're like, well, we're descendants of Moses. We sit in his seat. We act in his stead. We inherited his power in the same way that the apostles are like, we sit in Joseph's seat. He restored the church, and it's passed down to us, and here we are. We get to define what the scriptures are, what truth is, how things get interpreted and applied. But then they get so caught up in all these like weird legalistic traditions and invented rules that they forget and ignore the weightier matters of the law, which are love and justice and all that. If you love your partner, if you respect your partner, if you have that mutual excitement and integrity and honor and respect and collaborative energy and all that, why would God care about anything else?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Why?
Mommy of Kittens said, I was called selfish for only having one child. I was a single mom. That's, mind-blowing. Someone said, hey, Bae, I've become convinced that the only admissible defense of the law of chastity that ever existed was to prevent unwanted pregnancies. With the advent of birth control, kind of becomes irrelevant. Yeah, except when birth control started getting mainstream, the church really railed against it and said it was sinful, and they basically talked about it the way they talk about abortion now. I mean, I've said this a lot, but when I took the institute, like pre-marriage classes, or maybe it was just institute, in like when would that have been, like 2015, there was a massive section just of quotes about how birth control was sinful. So
that you should just accept whatever God gives you.
Yeah.
And that's terrible.
Never caused any trauma for anybody, because you can totally meet all of your kids' emotional and physical needs when you have 10 of them. I'm not saying it can't be done, but I'm just saying it's very, very hard, especially if you have those kids when you yourself are a kid and you never get time to reckon with your own trauma or the way that your upbringing affected you.
Which is what they're counting on. What they were counting on you being unable to.
They do not want you to reckon with your trauma. Because what does it mean to reckon with your trauma? To reckon with the ways that you've been disconnected from yourself and the ways that you've self-betrayed to please. And the church is an integral part of that. And so, duh. Tabitha sent us a super chat on Venmo and said, Mormon apostle tells you to rush into marriage.
The other thing about like rushing kids too, it feels so irresponsible to say that everybody should just be pumping out as much kids as they want. Like, it's the conservative view on this is so backward to me, because they're like, everybody should just be pumping out kids, and we're in danger of as a species going extinct unless everyone's just like Elon Musk has posted recently to that effect.
Ew.
Yeah, crazy.
Why has he become so right-wing all of a sudden?
I don't know, because he's got $1 gajillion and wants to keep it.
Who cares if the species dies out? Do you know what I mean? If we're just like not really feeling it with bringing kids into the world, then just let it go. Sometimes it's good to just let things die,
But we've never been further from that. Like, in the last decade, we've added like 1 billion people. And before that, it was like, 50 years or something. And we're getting this like exponential growth of human population. We're not even close to that. When have you been
just one type of semi-carnivorous monkey? There's like 8 billion. We don't need that.
And like, when have you been somewhere and been like, man, you know what I wish? I wish there were just like a billion more people around. Wouldn't it be cool if here in the mountains or here in
That's
this
what I hate
public
about
square or
hiking.
here
It's
in,
just always so
there's
like,
just like a jillion people, and
is
why do we
there one
want
around?
more people everywhere? That's other than to feed into systems that are sucking money and resources and life out of people, and that the more people they can create to suck out of, the better that they'll do. Like,
and the more scarce resources are for those people, the more they're willing to do the bidding of the people in power.
Exactly.
Like, that's why poverty is the draft, right? And it's the same in Mormonism.
well, and okay, so let's go into like abortion and things. It's like they're so against abortion because you're killing a potential life. They have way more compassion for imaginary people. That's what a fetus is an imaginary person, the potential for a person. You have no idea who they are, what they will become, what they will do. It's just this idea. And that idea, that potentiality, is in the conservative mind so much more important than any real lived experience of any actually living, breathing human being on planet Earth. Because the minute you're born, they don't care about making sure that you have enough to eat. There was just a big thing about how, Democrats are so evil. They want to give kids free food at school. Could you imagine anything worse that the federal government can do? And it's like, what kind of ass backward moral system are we
in their
participating
defense, who would you be today if you hadn't had to scam your way into free lunches because you didn't get given lunch? That's
it does. It builds character.
Was built on the back of not getting lunch. So,
but it's like they and this is an old talking point, but like they just don't care about people once they're actual people, only when they're potential people.
Again, because it's so much easier to care about people conceptually in this like abstract way that just requires you to pay lip service than to do anything real.
Yes.
Like, conceptual reality is being put above reality has just been
Oaks from
grinding my gears.
Yeah, right? Oaks from like a moral standpoint would be like, wickedness is going up in the world. There's more theft and there's more violence, and there actually is not. But he thinks that bad actions just happen in a vacuum for a fault of moral character, when in fact people steal out of scarcity, which is funny. He's about to quote Les Mis. I did a little read ahead.
Ew.
I know. And it's like, what did you miss about that whole story? A normal person trying to help his family stole, faced an unjust reciprocation there, left it, and then had this showdown with like Law and Order versus actual good. Like that whole story was to expose the problems with our traditional approaches to justice, and showing that like bad behavior doesn't exist in a vacuum. People steal because there's scarcity. People are violent because there's scarcity, because trauma gets perpetuated because people don't have the ability, the resources to deal with the problems that are going on in their life. They're really sick. They can't pay to go to a hospital and get better. So they just keep getting sick. So they're working in conditions that are hurting them bodily, and they can't, it's like everyone gets so trapped and hurt, and the problems get compacted by the system and compounded by the system, and then people act out negatively, and then it's like, well, you need to go to jail and face time for what you did. And it's like, what if we just stopped encouraging everybody to have children that they can't take care of, that they can't teach, that they can't properly instruct, that they can't give good healthcare to, that like, you're obviously saying we as a community, as a national village, don't have what it takes to raise children, because it is a collective effort. It does take a village, and it does take a community, and we're all responsible for the process of life making, not just those of us who are breeding. And we could just nip so much in the bud by not creating the people who are like getting into these harmful systems and perpetuating the problems. Yeah. Like, why shouldn't we be more discriminate about when and how we have children? Why on earth would it be bad to be able to support your family?
And what is loving about being more flippant in when you have kids? Like, what is loving about bringing kids into the world before you have the resources to take care of them? It's just such an ass backwards. Like, even just the most basic pop psychology understanding of trauma would tell you that's a horrific idea. And this man is the leader of a global church and was on the Utah Supreme Court.
That will tell you to give money to him and
before
to them.
You feed those children that he's encouraging you to have before
while they sit on billions of dollars.
But also, I mean, I don't know if you already mentioned this, but every time a Mormon baby is born, then the church's numbers go up, right? So of course they want you to have more.
Yep.
Those who intentionally postpone marriage represent opportunities lost and blessings postponed, President Oakes said. This is so bad.
Some blessings come to us now, some only come in eternity. When did you become the mediator of when blessings arrive and all? This is all fear-mongering, and they do it all the fucking time. They're like, God will make you happy unless he doesn't, and in which case you'll be happy later. Either way, you have to obey me. And it's like, sometimes it's this way, other times it's not way. Either way, you just have to submit to him and turn off your fucking brain.
Okay, can I just say, comment from Lexi, I have to get an abortion in 2 days, and I felt so guilty, and I'm only 5 weeks. I didn't realize my Mormon upbringing would affect me so hard. Hearing you guys talk about it brings me comfort. I know there's not really anything we can do to like shift the fact that your body has just like received all that conditioning, but you do not need to feel guilty. Like there is nothing more, nothing honors the sacredness of human life more than not bringing it into the world. When you are anything less than 100% jazzed and ready and down for it in every single way, I don't think there's like any excuse too small to want to have an abortion.
Yep, children ought to be born into like a hell yeah atmosphere.
Big hell yeah, in every imaginable aspect, yeah. So we love you, and I hope it is as painless as possible. I know they can be shit from what I've heard, so we're with you.
Yeah.
I'm really okay. So let me finish this bit, and then I'm going to want to go on a rant. So those who intentionally postpone marriage represent opportunities lost and blessings postponed, President Oakes said, including delays in important personal growth that occurs through that relationship, decreased opportunities to work together in building the kingdom of God, and fewer children born. Let's just look at the delays in important personal growth and opportunities lost, because if you just marry the first return missionary that you fall in love with and that falls in love with you,
or that will work, because people marry all the time for less than ecstatic love.
There is such an enormous chance that is going to be a relationship where you just unconsciously play out all of your trauma with absolutely no awareness. Like I know some people marry their high school sweethearts and it works for them and good for them.
Congrats.
But for the majority of people, you learn about yourself through dating different people. Like each person reflects different versions of yourself back to you, and each person reveals different dysfunctions you might be prone to have, or exposes different wounds that you have, be they attachment wounds or just like all the wounds that we have in relationships. And so to encourage this, like, and I think that Mormons right now are marrying way too soon. Even if the average marriage age has gone up in Mormons, it's not fucking good enough. Like, it's still terrible. They're still almost always committing for eternity, getting engaged, getting married during the honeymoon phase, during the phase where your body is pumping out chemicals telling you this is the perfect person for you. Like, it is not wise, in my opinion, for anyone to be getting engaged or married in the honeymoon phase, because you just don't know. Like, it's just insanity. It's insanity to me that you would be encouraging people to essentially like date less people, because that's kind of like the implication, right? If you get married sooner, you're cutting off your options sooner, which means you're limiting the number of people you're going to date. I feel like you're massively limiting your personal growth, especially in the realm of relationships, because once you're in that one and you're in a Mormon marriage, like it's not like divorce is like really okay in the church. Like, then you have to try and make that work. And how do a lot of people try and make it work? By just like repressing entire parts of themselves, and just by, constantly self-betraying in the service of playing a role that these kinds of men are telling them they need to play, fragmenting off like whole parts of their personality and things that bring them joy. And it's just like absolute insanity.
Alex Crandall says, hard to imagine a situation that robbed more opportunities and personal growth for young LDS women than 18 to 20. It's because, and they want, they're coming from a paradigm where they don't want women to have personalities or responsibilities or jobs or influence outside of the home, right? It's like, you have to stay there and your job is primarily for the nurture of the children. A
big thing with being a woman is like, the younger you are, the less you know what you deserve. That is just like the female experience. And it's also true for men too. Like, the less you've dated, the less you realize is out there, and the less it's easier to feel like, oh, well, this is pretty good. And like, these men are telling me to not be like so picky. So like, this is probably the best I can do. No concept of like how, like the entire range of connection you're capable of having with other people.
I'm saying this as like being in the best relationship of my life, that I also don't look at my past relationships and like, those were all wrong.
No.
It was like each one taught me so much.
Yeah.
And gave me so much perspective and opened my heart to loving more and better and more thoughtfully and creatively. And I look back on those memories with all of, you know, my various partners and appreciate that. And it's funny that someone who has such a diverse portfolio of assets doesn't appreciate the value of diversity in a racial issues, because he recently came out and said, the Lord doesn't care about diversity. The one who created all the diversity in the world, all the uncountable variations of life, doesn't seem to care about diversity. Okay. And doesn't care about diversity in dating. Like, it does strengthen you and rounds you off as a person. The more types of people you're able to interact with. And
I just think it's impossible to like grasp at like 18, 19, 20, 21, whatever age he's like hoping people get married. You know, even older than that, even, you know, like late 20s. It's just impossible. You don't know what you don't know. And that's like the whole thing with all of this. So you can't even grasp how much you know, I remember being like 18, 19, 20 and dating. You can't grasp how much you're going to change because your brain is genuinely continuing to develop. Yeah, literally not developed. Like, you are still developing. You have only, you know, at 18 or 19, you've only experienced life, you know, under your parents or in your like in your primary home, what do you even call it?
Yeah.
And then, you know, maybe you're in college. I mean, like he's talking to like college age kids, right? And this was a message we heard at BYU.
Freshman age college.
And it's like,
kids.
so you've never like lived on your own. So it's also very dangerous to tell young women, especially in a patriarchal system, to just get married quick, because they've known like, well, if you're in a good Mormon home, they've known like their father's authority. And then when you're in college, you're still like, you're under a system, you know. It's not like that stepping out into the world and everything's open to you. So it's just like rife for like for getting women into situations where they have to submit basically to men, which is what the church also teaches, right? Like the man is the head and the woman is the neck, or just all those analogies. I mean, like the whole
it's
of Mormon
called the patriarchal
been,
order. Like, it's set up to prioritize the pleasure, perspective, and power of men.
And guess what? Right now is the least sexist Mormonism has ever been in terms of how it talks about how men and women should be in marriage, and it's still bad. But what does it say? That like the average age that women are choosing to get married in Mormonism is going up. Well, they're like getting their wits about them a little bit more, and the leadership doesn't like that, which is so scary. And also, I've known so many friends who are like on the fence about whether they should get married to someone. And there is just so much pressure to like have a spiritual experience telling you, yeah, just go ahead with it. Because like, you know, we've already put 8 months into this, so we should just see it through. We should just pick this person. And like, I've heard from so many like Mormon, ex-Mormon women that they were just like racked with stress about like actually committing, but they just like felt like they had to.
Oh yeah.
And if you're in that kind of state and you get a talk like this from Elder Oaks, that could easily tip you over the edge. Then you're like, marriage is a big deal. It is sacred. Like, it's a huge commitment, especially if like you're also encouraging people to bring children into the world really quickly. Just this whole thing is like, this is like the top tier of damaging teachings in Mormonism, as far as I'm concerned.
Yes.
I got married in Mormonism at 22. It's shocking looking back now, like what passed as like a good relationship in my mind. And that wasn't even that bad compared to like other, like more patriarchal, for example, situations. Like, I didn't feel like I had a sexist dynamic in my marriage, luckily, but lots of people do. And 22 was way too young to like even, I had no idea what I didn't know about relationships. I had not reckoned with my trauma. It's not even necessarily that possible to have like reckoned with your trauma that young, because again, your brain is still developing. There's things that the psyche kind of keeps from you for a while until you're a bit more mature.
Being 22 is about falling in love with strangers.
Yes.
Breakfast at midnight. Making fun of your exes.
Making fun of hipsters. Yeah, it is not for this bullshit. Yeah. So he said, delays.
We got a super chat.
Oh, thank you.
Janae, I
left the church before I got married, but didn't construct the idea about relationship standards. Ended up divorced. Looking back, 22 might as well still be childhood because of how little I knew myself at the time. Yeah, I feel the exact same way. It's wild to me that I had a wedding and I invited my parents to it and like, oh.
It feels like one of those nights. I'm getting married.
So
I'm
good.
having 10 kids.
So just the idea that you're causing delays in personal growth by not getting yourself into a marriage, especially if you're a woman, because again, it's a patriarchal system.
Here's an extremely emotionally stunted old man telling you that you're
I
missing
know.
out on. I'm like, oh,
I know.
This is great advertising to not end up like you. Thank you.
Yeah, like what do you consider personal growth? Because to me, the minute that your sort of life structure becomes dependent on a relationship, and in Mormonism on you each playing these specific roles, you are like making personal growth so much harder because you're only allowing for it within that tiny box. And really, it's more important for you to maintain that box, the integrity of that box, than to grow. So the growth is
to
always
flourish
going
as
to be secondary.
individuals.
Yes, exactly. So you're only going to grow in ways that support the integrity of the box. And that's why it's good for people to kind of do the bulk of, though we're growing our whole lives, but to do a lot of their growth before getting into a marriage, because you really just don't know. And also just the things you like at 22 are not the things you like at 30 or even 23. So he said, it's funny how he said it also in the list, decreased opportunities to work together in building the kingdom of God. That's kind of saying the quiet part loud, right?
You guys can't go to the marriage service,
church.
clean the toilets at the church together. We're not going to have enough volunteers for that if you don't do it. So a lot of opportunities being missed for you.
He said, you know all of this, and you need to know that your leaders know that many of our singles are not marrying sooner for reasons beyond their control.
Okay, you guys can control it, but you're just choosing to be bad.
Well, that bit is like a little bit of lip service to like, well, if it's not your fault, like we get it. We're not trying to be too crazy. In truth, marriage is a gift, Sister Oakes added. Not only does marriage give us the opportunity for children, but it gives us the opportunity and incentive to begin a journey of growing with one another.
Marriage doesn't give us the opportunity for children, just on just completely logical grounds. Those two are unrelated. Marriage happened child rearing, production and rearing happened for hundreds and thousands of years.
No, Banksy has to get married before he's biologically able to have kids. It's marriage.
Marriage is a construct.
In the musical based on Victor Hugo's Les Miserables is the line, "To love another person is to see the face of God." Nowhere does that happen better than in marriage, Sister Oakes said.
Just can't. I already said this, but I cannot handle conservatives quoting Les Miserables. It's like you did not get anything from that. You did not understand it one bit. You are completely you're married to Javert.
Also, just major superiority complex to think that only married people sort of see the face of God through love, because that is like quite a universal human experience. People from all cultural backgrounds and traditions will have that experience of feeling like you see the divine in the face of another through falling in love, and nowhere does that happen better in marriage. Basically, like what makes you think that?
That's on our contemporary framework for marriage, because it used to not have to do with romance at all. It happened to be with acquiring a young asset who you get to fuck and who will raise your kids.
I think no more of taking another wife than I do buying another cow. I think that's Eva C. Kimball.
Yeah.
One of them. The postponement and devaluing of the importance of having children is another concern. President Oakes continued. I'd be overjoyed at statistics that people are having less kids. I'd be like, yeah, thank God. Like, especially if they're having them older.
It's interesting that they can never talk about things in like concrete terms of cause and fact, and this is why it's bad. It's always just, it's just bad. We're very concerned. You should do something else. Or
it's not what we do.
Yeah.
Yep.
Okay.
Well, again, I know we always make this point, but it's just the whole thing. Like if you've lived your life feeling like there are these eternal rules that cannot be broken, and then other people are waking up and being like, I actually don't have to stick to these. I'm allowed to have a life outside of them. That it makes sense that you would feel very like bothered by the fact that people, because it's like, well, it wasn't okay I didn't even know that was a choice I could have made, so it's very triggering,
especially when they're paying your salary.
Badass mother hugger, thank you. Glad you like the outfit.
I love this. A recent national poll showed that the importance of adults having children has dropped in the last 25 years from 66% to 33%.
Wow.
I think that's brilliant.
Yeah, great.
I'm right there in the 33. Just remember, a loving Heavenly Father has a plan for his young adults, and part of that plan is marriage and children. Cool.
Okay,
It's
but
really cool.
not for everybody, obviously, right? So why would we assume that's for everybody, right?
Mm-hmm.
A reminder about dating. For many years, the church has counseled youth not to date before age 16, unless you're dating the prophet. Then you can get married at 14 after he sends your dad on a mission. Look up the story of Lucy Walker if you're interested in that.
We have a video on it.
Perhaps some young adults, especially men, have carried that wise counsel to excess and determined not to date before age 26 or maybe even 36.
I bet they got a big laugh.
Oh, it did so hard. Oh, it's the same shit every time. Imagine having a genuinely funny apostle. That would be amazing. But you can't rise the ranks as like a genuinely,
because there's a level of like intelligence required, like awareness required, and an ability to hold competing ideas at once that is required to be genuinely funny.
Yes. He then reiterated the dating counsel he gave in 2005. To single men, he said, "Gather your courage and look for someone to pair off with. Start with a variety of dates with a variety of young women, and when that phase yields a good prospect, proceed to courtship. Men have the initiative, and you should go get on with it. A date must pass a test of the 3 Ps. Oh my God, I remember this. This is so dumb. Planned ahead, paid for, and paired off. President Oaks explained. I hate that idea that like you're like, okay, people aren't marrying. It's a shit economy. It's impossible to own a house these days. If you got another mouth to feed and you're working 3 jobs just so you can provide your kid that you were forced to have before you even knew anything about the world, and then not on top of that, you have to be paying for dates in order for them to count. Like, can't you just go on a walk in the park just to see how things go before you take things to the next level? I don't know.
We are living in an era where hot gay guys living in Malibu by the thousands are giving better dating advice on TikTok than we are getting from this guy, leader of a global church. Like, seriously, every hot gay guy on TikTok can give better dating advice than this. To the single women, Sister Oaks said, "Because I married at age 53, I know how the wait for a worthy companion feels, and the longing and heartache and tears on my pillow that often accompanied it."
That is so sad.
Like, everyone craves companionship. I get that, and like loneliness is real, but also just the idea that she saw herself kind of just waiting because that's the whole teaching behind all this, is like you're not complete until you find a man. You're not complete without another person. It's just like the twin flame concept, or just this whole concept that you're half of a person until you find someone of the opposite sex to pair off with. So stupid.
I hate how the church keeps people disconnected from just the full experience of being human. And not just human, but like an animal. Every animal that I know loves to just be in proximity with other animals. That goes for cats, that goes for dogs, that goes for reptiles even. Birds like to just be touching other animals. It gives comfort. And like I think about the gift that it is to like fall asleep next to another person, a non-sexual act. Just falling asleep in proximity to another person is such a blessing of life. It makes you feel comfort and safety on like a deep physiological level, because it's safer to sleep next to people. Your anxiety goes down, and how that just feels like a human birthright to be able to share that experience with someone. But unless you're married, then you're not allowed to have this, and you have to rush in and have kids, and that's the only way you're allowed to do it. It's thinking that she couldn't enjoy that, couldn't experiencing that until she was 53 years old, that her youth was squandered, and then now she only has it with President Oaks.
I wonder why it took her that long.
Sad.
Like
the Lord was grooming her to be a wife of an apostle.
Well, I know it's not all about this, but she's a cute looking woman. Like she doesn't seem like she wouldn't be attractive to men, and given the era she grew up in, I'm just kind of surprised that no one was interested in her, and that makes me think like maybe there was something else going on. And then by the time she was 53, she was like, well, maybe it's non-sexual. I don't know.
It's weird how Mormonism focuses, the focal point of the Mormon life is on marriage, so that like everything leads up to that decision. It's the most important decision of your life. You got to make it as soon as possible, though, and you got to have as many kids as you can right off the bat. and like puts people's development on hold, like your whole life. Like I didn't have ambitions. And, you know, I went to school. I was like, yeah, I guess I'll study this and I'll take these classes. But really what I cared about was getting married, because that was the thing that the church told me was the most important thing. I didn't go study abroad because I was like, there's not Mormons abroad. You have to stay here at BYU, Idaho, like, and find a wife here. That's what's going to happen. And I was so fucking anxious the whole time. I had to see a therapist because I was dying of anxiety every time I was in a relationship, because I was like, shit, I have to make a decision to marry this person I just met a month ago. I have to decide that in a month. Otherwise, I'm not going to see her again for the next 6 months because of the BYU Idaho track system. It was like so agonizing. I would have killed myself if I got married in Mormonism. I would have. I'm not cut out for that. It would have graded me to death. I would have helped
you divorce.
Thank you.
And I'm glad.
But I would like have. As a Mormon, I was like, I'll have kids because the apostle said that's what you need to do. And I would have had kids and would have found out that kids are way too much for my system, because every time I'm around kids now, I'm like, this is way too much for my system. This is not for me.
I love them. But...
yeah, they're great. And I love the people who do feel able to do that and who have the space to do that and the temperament and physiology to offer that. It's like, great. I'm glad that people are doing that, who have prepared themselves to know what to anticipate, who have learned and tried to deconstruct the bad things that they inherited from their parents, and try to approach this next generation with more love, more intelligence, and all that. But to just rush right into it.
I'm really glad that someone said the focus on marriage also downplays the importance of friendship, because yes, in Mormonism, how much would we get? Well, number one, I feel like a common teaching was like, don't be friends with the opposite sex, basically. Like you can be friends with the opposite sex if you're on a group date with them, like with another couple, or in like a church setting. But like, and I don't know, because we were Mormon, but I feel like for some reason we like never really took that on, because we knew that our friendship was like so platonic. So we were just like, well, then fuck, I don't know. I feel like we didn't take on any church teaching, even though I was only married for like 1 month in Mormonism. So maybe that doesn't even count. But yeah, like the type of friendship we have would have been unacceptable if we were in Mormon marriages, which is wild to think about. Like there's just a point. I remember even just like staying at my friend Aaron's house after graduating, because I was like in between housing. And this Mormon family in the area who was really nice to me, and they are lovely and I love them, and they were just trying to help. But they were like horrified at the thought that I was like temporarily living with my friend Aaron because he's a boy, and you don't do that. And I just didn't come from a culture that was like that. So it was just really weird for me to have to get on board with.
At school, I always thought that was so absurd. I'm like, why can't I have women roommates? Like, just because someone's the opposite sex doesn't mean we're going to have sex. Like,
I know. And I just feel like thinking, like, so many Mormon women would benefit from having more friendships with men. I just think it's like good to have friendships with all types of people. And nobody benefits when they just like cut off entire groups of people as potential friends, especially because it's like you're usually more inclined to cut off people you might connect with, which is just disturbing. And also then it's like, what does that say about the strength of your relationship? If being friends with the opposite sex feels somehow threatening to it, then that tells me that you're maybe having to, and I think this is a common thing, you're having to play a certain role within your marriage. And it isn't necessarily in alignment with who you are in your friendship, because maybe in friendship you feel more able to be yourself. And so
because you're not trying to play into a role, you're
exactly
just
because you're free to more, because there's less expectations on you to like be one specific way in a friendship. And so I can see why friendships aren't necessarily emphasized in Mormonism. They're only emphasized through the lens of like if it helps you be more Mormon and in like in a church context. But I don't feel like there's really much good stuff about friendship and Mormonism, especially
intergendered friendships.
Definitely. Just the thought that you're supposed to get married at like 20, ideally, according to President Oaks, and then let's say you're a woman, you get married at 20, and then from that point on you just don't really have any like straight male friendships. Like you can have a group friendship, but that's not the same. You don't get to like connect in the same way, and just to like never be able to connect one-on-one with men just from that point on, insane. But also, again, it helps you not grow so much that you might outgrow your little box of the church and your marriage. So I guess it's helpful. So she said that we're still talking about Sister Oaks. To those marking time waiting for a marriage prospect, stop waiting and start preparing through education, experience, and planning, she said. It's like, yeah, but then once you find a man, you're supposed to like de-emphasize education almost immediately. Don't wait for happiness to be thrust upon you. Seek out opportunities for service, for learning, and most importantly, trust in the Lord, calling on the name of the Lord daily and standing steadfastly in the faith of that which is to come. I promise, as you do, happiness will come to you. Don't really love the idea, even though she's saying don't wait for happiness to be thrust upon you. She's still just like, happiness will come to you if you're just really Mormon, which feels equally as damaging of a teaching.
And if it doesn't, it will eventually. The little loophole there.
Although President Oaks originally gave that dating advice back in 2005, I love how they're like, this whole thing of like the 3 Ps and like it stunts your personal growth if you get married after 21. Although that was given in 25, we're doubling down on it. It's just as relevant today in the era of, incredible relationship coaches being everywhere online.
The 3 Ps are only appreciating in value like comic books and vintage cars.
To young adults worried about I love that he's tackling our affordable home crisis. To young adults worried about the shortage of affordable homes and increasing amounts of student debt, President Oaks encouraged, go forward with faith and do the best you can in housing market circumstances less favorable than I and your grandparents encountered in our early years, and especially work to minimize student debt. In God's plan, we can have it all, but not in the sequence the world seems to dictate. Okay, it's just complete bullshit.
Zero empathy whatsoever.
At this point, if marriage is the most important family unit to God and like the most important thing in the world, and the church has so much money, it could literally be like, everyone stop paying tithing, put that money towards owning a home, because we can see that you guys cannot own homes. And if you can't own homes, how are you realistically supposed to raise children in like a healthy, stable environment? Like that's one of the biggest sort of traumas a child can go through is like unstable housing. So that's just something they could do. Not in the sequence the world seems to dictate.
Just like the economic landscape is so radically different than when he was dating, and to just be like,
less favorable.
It's very different, but just keep doing it the exact same way and you'll be fine. Trust me. I went through it too in exactly different circumstances. But
yeah. Also, work to minimize student debt. Okay, I'll just do that.
Great.
Like, yeah, never heard that before. Like, where is your support for Joe Biden's student debt relief plan? That's what I want to hear.
Crazy that American conservative Christianity evangelicals have turned Jesus Christ on his head and made him it is the Antichrist in the world today, where it's like, oh yeah, someone who strangles somebody to death on the subway is now the archetype of the Good Samaritan.
What was that?
There was a mentally unstable, houseless person on a New York subway who was yelling at people and causing a scene, and a Marine strangled him to death. And all the conservatives are like, guy's a hero, did the right thing. And people are like,
is he getting in trouble for that?
No. American Christians have raised millions and millions of dollars for this guy's legal defense. Like enough to house all the houseless people in the United States. But they're calling him like a good Samaritan, like using that exact phrase, being like, this is what Jesus would want.
The guy was
to
just
see
yelling,
the person
yelling.
Yeah, I'm sure he has a history of provoking people.
I'm
But
also
it's like
sure
that is not a capital crime. Like,
and if you're a Marine, you know how to take someone out without killing
Exactly.
them. Like, you didn't have to kill him.
Exactly.
It just really is saying the quiet part loud, just like the absolute disdain
Yes.
for anyone that doesn't fall within the in-group.
yes,
That's
which is the
horrific.
exact opposite of what I read from Jesus Christ's gospel, which is caring for the marginalized, the poor, and the oppressed. Like that was his whole fucking shtick. And they're like, nope, it's the exact opposite. Violence against marginalized people is awesome.
We got a super chat via Venmo from Bailey. For those of you who just joined, we're reading out Venmo super chats too, because YouTube takes a percentage. Bailey said, first time pregnant here, and it was only after leaving the church that I felt like I could say hell yes to kids. Finally felt like I wouldn't lose myself, my personality, and my career in becoming a mother. Wonder why. People who do want to have kids, it can be so much more joyful when you are doing it not out of feeling compelled to, or like you have to have your entire self swallowed up in it.
Mm-hmm.
It's not healthy for kids to see their mothers so boxed in. Like kids need to see their mums be self-actualized and have a life outside of them.
That was advice I heard you give a mother that I thought was really good, because they were kind of worrying about like if getting involved in their interests was going to be detrimental to the kids. And you were like, no, you're modeling what it is like to take care of yourself, to develop your talents, and to, do all that thing, which I thought was a really, really good comment. Another super chat from
Thank
Jessabeth.
you.
And they dug up all this stuff on the homeless person. That's not even the point. He was strangled. No one deserves that. Exactly. Like, it's kind of like...
Like, are we just doing vigilante justice now? Where just like any conservative is allowed to just murder whoever they want because they don't like him?
Yes, that's like the conservative thing right now. It's this like cowboy justice, violence glorification
They're like so
thing.
horny for the police and the justice system.
Yeah, totally. I mean, it's like when someone resists arrest and then gets shot, and everyone's like, "Well, then you shouldn't resist arrest." And it's like, when did resisting arrest become a capital offense that anybody is allowed to execute at any time without jury or judge? Like, that's insane.
Like,
that's
it takes
unjust.
them decades to kill people on death row, and suddenly it's just.
And I don't think they should at all. I think everyone's playing God when they decide who they're allowed to kill, and that playing God can be leveraged against certain communities that the structures in power don't find favorable.
Amen. President Oaks encouraged youth to establish in their minds the truth that they are beloved children of God. His love endows you with the self-respect, the strength, and the motivation to move against whatever problems you face in life. And never forget that his servants love you. We love you. I'm not feeling it.
You're not cuddled up with me at night, Elder Oaks, and thank God.
A 16-year-old woman he called Amy recently sent President Oaks a letter expressing that she wants to do what is right, but feels surrounded by values and behaviors she feels to be wrong, and she doesn't know what to do about it. I love when they do these like softball Q&As where they just set up like the dream question they hope to be asked, when it's like that does not wrestle with the complexity youth are actually facing.
Someone just asked me this really insightful question of like, why am I so good? And I'm gonna try to respond to that.
In her letter, Amy writes about church friends who are confused about their gender, a condition called gender dysphoria. I have pondered this subject for some time, President Oaks said. I can't wait to hear it. Like, weigh in, let's hear it. Now, in the love I feel for those concerned with such subjects, I have felt impressed by the Spirit to use this opportunity to emphasize some of the precious truths the gospel of Jesus Christ reveals to help us with such confusions.
Again, this is a man with so much love for queer people that he encouraged their total removal from the public sphere. They're allowed to appear in public life, and interpersonally encourage parents not to let their gay children stay with them because that's condoning something that lots of us have to deal with. First, so that's the kind of love we're talking about. Just
I'm feeling it.
Oh yeah.
First, to love God, which individuals show by keeping his commandments, and second, to love one's neighbor. We must do both, and that is not easy. Many of us have a tendency to give less attention to loving our neighbor and to overemphasize keeping the law. That is surely my tendency because of my legal training. However, it is also vital for each of us to keep the second commandment, which is like unto it, to love our neighbors the way Jesus loved us. It's interesting that he kind of admitted that he tends to lean towards the sort of personal scrupulosity versus the loving others.
Javert energy, that's what I'm saying.
Thank you, Hopeful, for the super chat. After my mission, I knew everything. I was 21 and I knew the one path to happiness: get married and have kids. Anything else was selfish and wicked. No travel, no hobbies, no search for self. Now I wonder, why the rush? Yeah.
Good question. And thank you so much.
Don't they, in your final interview with your president on the mission, like start talking to you about getting married?
Oh, yeah.
So you're like 21, 20, and they're like, all right, go home, get married.
Yeah, they have this whole thing. If you've had a companion for 2 years, now you need to go find your eternal companion. It's like, you got me to think about these men I've been living with for 2 years straight as my companions, and now I'm just supposed to switch gears to women. Cool.
The Savior offers a divine example of keeping both commandments. In John 8, a group of Pharisees and scribes bring a woman to be judged. Their intent, President Oaks explained, was to trap the Savior in contradicting either the law of Moses or the law of Rome, which did not allow for the capital punishment directed by the law of Moses for the woman's sin. The Savior effectively disarmed those who sought immediate application of the law by saying, "He that is without sin among you, let him first cast a stone at her." The Savior then applied the power of love. He mercifully declined to condemn the woman, and that loving act lifted her to a new life. See, it's like, why can't we just take that then? Why can't we just take the, like, let's just like not condemn anyone for their romantic or sexual proclivities unless they be genuinely harmful to others, and kind of just like shut up.
Sorry, I just have a lot of thoughts about Moses and the Old Testament right now because I'm doing a lot of biblical historicity research. And
shout out Dan McClellan. Is it Dan McClellan?
Yeah, it's great.
Dan's been on a kick.
But you know, the like when I center myself and think about the experiences that I've had with God or spirituality or whatever in the church or outside, those like transcendental, really connective, loving feelings could never justify me hurting somebody else. So in that feeling where I'm like, oh my God, Jesus loves me so much, I couldn't be like, and I feel like I should be able to own that person and make them do labor for me for free. Otherwise I'll beat the shit out of them and they can't escape. Like I should keep them in chains. Like that feeling and that perspective are completely incompatible. Or like that feeling and, oh, someone did something I don't agree with, I should throw rocks at them until they're dead. So to think like any Mormon or Latter-day Saint or Christian who has had that kind of experience, like those genuine transformative, I felt the love of Jesus Christ and I'm transformed in his love. How can you look at the Old Testament and be like, that's my guy, that's my God, that's the good law he gave, the one where we keep slaves, where we commit genocide against the people where we don't like, where you can just rape prisoners of war. It's awesome. Like how do you not see that? And so then to be like, oh yeah, we have this law that came from Moses. Okay, we have a law that was written down 400 years after when Moses was supposed to have lived that says you're allowed to kill women who are taken in adultery. What about the fucking man who was taken in adultery? It takes two to tango. You can't have, like, this whole thing is, like, the fact that he is appealing to this story that is so wild to begin with and just treating it as like, the Savior actually countered this thing in Moses. It's like that thing where it was like they were going to kill a woman for having sex with a guy. Where's this guy? And then you're going to try to draw this thing out from it, which is like, yeah, we should actually be merciful toward people who break the law, but we should reinstitute all these laws that we got in the old book that told us that we should kill people and have slaves because that's what it says in there. And that's why we're not allowed to have gay people on planet Earth.
Yeah.
It's like, do you not use your brain at all?
It's like going back to that concept we've talked about a lot in recent videos, I feel like, of when you haven't like lived with an accurate understanding of what it feels like to be like in love as a state of being. You only understand love as this conceptual reality that's been so bastardized, and it like is so much about authority and manipulation and abuse and like all that stuff. Like it's kind of easy to justify. You don't see the discrepancies because how Mormons will be like, it's actually loving to lay down the law sometimes, or it's there's kind of that mindset of like, well, at the time it would have been loving to like follow the racism, or it's just it's like loving to do the right thing, but it's like, but that doesn't actually jive with like love is a state of being that is in your body that creates this like unifying feeling. And like you said, it's not possible to feel like genuine love in your body and then be like, and I want to own that slave. Like,
and I should cut off the head of that defenseless drunk and take his records.
Exactly. But it's like, if you've never really had much experience with genuine love outside of coercion and authority and abuse and manipulation and all that, then you don't really know.
Yeah.
So it's all just kind of semantics, or it's all just this conceptual reality to you. And then the rest of us are outside screaming, like, how can we be so hypocritical? And it's like, they don't even necessarily know they're being hypocritical because they haven't felt it.
It is like the church is this conceptual labyrinth that just keeps people wandering down these dead-end corridors looking for meaning and purpose and being like, oh, as long as you just keep following us, you'll be good. And it's like so removed from actual lived experience. Okay, the Savior effectively disarmed those who sought immediate application of the law by saying, he that is without sin among you, let him first cast a stone at her. The Savior then applied the power of love. He mercifully declined to condemn the woman, and that loving act lifted her to a new life. Okay, then why don't you follow that example and shut up about gay people for the rest of your goddamn life? Right? Follow that example. Do that. Something tells me. But on the application of the law would come later when she would be judged on her whole of her life, including repentance. But on that earlier occasion, the Savior extended love and mercy by refraining from condemning and then affirmed the law by saying, go and sin no more. Again, the guy gets off scot-free.
So this woman was caught in adultery. So having sex with some other guy. As I understand it, at the time, couldn't you be raped and then have to marry the guy because
Yeah.
he raped you.
Yeah.
So she may not even have chosen her first husband. That's just under the laws that under this kind of system. I just think that's worth pointing out. Also worth pointing out that who's to say that it was consensual having to, you just don't fucking know at this time. Like women had no rights whatsoever.
Right.
Like I don't think women were, you know, out sampling all the different men they could date, like he's advising men to do.
Right.
Notice how he was only like, young men, you need to sample all these different women. I don't know that he teaches women to sample all these different men.
No, they're just supposed to be waiting there like delicate flowers,
Mm-hmm.
protruding their aroma to attract some boys.
A Christopherson quote now. Elder Christopherson taught, putting the first commandment first does not diminish our ability to keep the second commandment. I love how they're just showing how much they're wrestling with the fact that they're supposed to be all about love, but it is not loving to be homophobic. Like that's essentially just like them trying to like work out that in their own minds.
Because again, their concept of God is not Alpha and Omega, the sum of all things. All perceptual reality is an aspect of God that I'm viewing and interacting with, and that the more I can open myself up to this entire experience and find my connection in it, which then I think the next step of that kind of paradigm is, well, the people in your immediate proximity, and not just people, but the things, the relations in your immediate proximity, focus on that first. But that's so removed from his whole thing, because his whole thing isn't about love. It's not about being connected. It's not about neighbors. It's literally just about obedience. It's I'm in charge and you need to listen to me. I don't have to make sense. I don't have to have any kind of like clear, consistent message. You just have to keep obeying me and praying, paying, and obeying, regardless of how much it hurts you, regardless of how much it puts you in stress or peril or affects your children or their lives or their happiness. It doesn't matter. Just keep following me.
That's
like
the most
that's his
loving
whole
thing of all.
Yep.
On the contrary, it amplifies and strengthens it. Our love of God elevates our ability to love others more fully and perfectly because we, in essence, partner with God to take care of his children. It's basically just back to the line of reasoning that is like, it's loving to be homophobic, actually, because that's what God wants.
How not loving is actually more loving than loving. Incredible.
LDS Living has been crushing it lately. In a previous talk, President Oakes referred to continually trying to balance the dual commandments of love and law.
Love is the law. That was like, that is the whole fucking point of the New Testament, is that the old law was done away. He fulfilled that. And now the higher law isn't an even more complex series of rules and regulations. That was what Jesus said was the problem with the Pharisees. They kept inventing all these new rules and regulations. And he said, get rid of that. It's all done. The new law is love. It's having the law inscribed on the fleshy tablets of the heart, because you and me and all of us are adept enough at recognizing our own human capacity for compassion and acting on it. We don't need to be told in every single situation, oh, this is the right thing to do, obey me. It's like, you know when you're doing something out of kindness versus out of anger, or out of maliciousness, the intent to harm versus the intent to help. We know that.
You are not raising money for that Marine on the train out of love.
Yeah, no.
But I had such a good point, and now I've forgot it, and I really want to remember.
Balance the dual commandments of love and law.
Well, a harsh truth is that when you are like, perfect love does cast out fear.
Yeah.
Did Jesus say that?
Yeah, or
he
it said
was
in the
right
Bible.
about that,
I think it's
as
in
far as
Timothy
I
or
can
something.
tell. Perfect love does cast out fear, but Mormonism is a high control group that relies on phobia indoctrination to keep people in and to keep people in the us versus them mindset. So were members of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints actually existing in a state of being, you know, even just most of the time, or like the majority of the time, they would probably find their way out of that group because being in Mormonism demands that you buy into these fear narratives, us versus them, what would happen if you left it, blah, 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 you know, not being homophobic, all that stuff. There's so much about Mormonism that demands that you be in a state of fear to keep going. So if they actually were in a state of love, as they're paying lip service to in this talk, but like, I don't see love in Elder Oaks. Like it doesn't, I'm not getting it personally.
And you're sorry.
No, it's basically it.
I was gonna say, I mean, that you just literally described my story. I got into researching about the church because I was like, we have the truth, so I don't have to be afraid about being proved wrong. I just keep looking for answers, and it'll make sense because that's the way that it is. And I can interact with apostates and hold space for them and listen to them and have genuine compassion on them, because I have the love of Jesus. I got Jesus Christ on my side. Who like, and then rookie mistake. You got to double down on that paranoia if you want to stay a good member. I'm sorry.
I now believe that goal to be better expressed as trying to live both of these commandments in a more complete way. Anyone who does not treat individuals who face gender identity challenges with love and dignity is not aligned with the teachings of the first and second great commandments.
That is you right off the bat. Okay, the family of proclamation to the world. Gender is an essential characteristic of individual pre-mortal, mortal, and eternal identity and purpose. All human beings, male and female, are created in the image of God, and each has a divine purpose. Right, that should have been stillborn from the beginning, aborted from the beginning. Why? Because intersex people exist. So you like right off the bat, you being like, there are two genders, and it's always been that way from all eternity to next. It's like we literally have people for whom that is not true. Yep. What more is there to say?
Yep.
You're wrong. Your hypothesis, out. Phooey. We have people who completely contradict that paradigm. End of story. So
also,
saying
Also, you don't get to decide what it looks like to treat people with gender dysphoria with dignity. Like he's saying anyone who, he's basically saying you got to treat trans people.
He's saying he said we shouldn't be allowed to have jobs. We shouldn't be allowed to be teachers. We shouldn't be allowed to be in the media, anything that can have an influence. He has said that. What do you mean?
So it's the same thing they do with love, where he's creating this conceptual reality of dignity, where dignity is whatever I think it is. I don't have to support like trans healthcare or anything like that. Like I just get to decide what I think it is to treat someone with dignity, and then that counts apparently.
Treating someone with dignity is stoning them to death when they have been guilty of sin. That's the only way to save them, says Brigham Young. That's the way to truly love them as Jesus Christ did, is that you kill them so that they can be atoned by the shedding of their own blood. That's what the prophet Brigham Young said.
On the subject of God's law, we need to remember that God has revealed again and again that he created male and female. And on the subject of our duty to love our neighbor, we need to remember that God has commanded us to love even those who do not keep all of the commandments.
But again, he didn't create just male and female.
This is I have a problem even with the term gender dysphoria. So much of our how do you say that? Pathologizing in our current thing places so much it casts this negative view of what's happening that faults the individual, or at least puts all the problem on the individual. And I look at people who are have all these stigmatic labels like gender dysphoria, like it's this problem. And it's I don't know if that's really the problem. I don't think it's the people who are facing a problem. I think we have a system that has set up these false binaries that aren't real, and people are having a negative reaction to that. It's not that they're suffering from this thing. It's you have presented this facade to us that's not real, and then when people are not living within it, you're like, oh, they're just experiencing gender dysphoria. Gender is a lie. This thing that we have to wear these types of clothes and women wear these types of clothes. What are you talking about? A couple hundred years ago, men were wearing dresses and women were wearing pants, and men were the first people to wear high-heeled shoes because that's what they wore when they rode. And all this stuff is just so relative and manufactured and artificial. There aren't these two stark binaries. That doesn't exist in nature. It's like when we say, God created trees, and we know exactly what a tree is. Well, if you look, there's some trees, like palm trees, for instance, aren't trees at all. They're actually closer to grass, and it's like you being I'm running away. I've just essentially the idea is that we've created these linguistic models for reality that do not accurately convey the full context of what's happening in reality. And then we get mad at things that don't fit in that binary. So we say, oh, this is what a tree is. And then we have a palm tree that doesn't fit in that. And we're like, oh, a palm tree is just struggling to fit into the tree binary. And it's you're the one who imposed that definition of what is actually going on with trees in the first place.
Yeah.
It's not as simple as chromosomes. Biology has shown us that chromosomal gender is actually pretty complex and not just this either one or the other. And that gender manifestation is way more complicated than that, because we still had that fake artificial gender binary before we knew anything about chromosomes. And no one was talking about, basic biology. It was well, God said in the Bible that Eve was taken from Adam, so that's the way that it is. It's but that's not the way that it is. So this is just a really long-winded way of saying gender dysphoria. It's okay, there are going to be people who don't fit in, who literally by birth, by whatever, don't fit into this fake, artificial, imposed paradigm for what people want to be experiencing, and then it's like, well, you're experiencing dysphoria, and I'm so sorry that you just can't.
Did psychologists use the term gender dysphoria? Because as I understand it, there is an experience of, like kids like genuinely feeling like their bodies are wrong, and they think they think they're about to get a different body than they have, because it all just feels so.
Yeah, that's pretty common.
Like, is that gender dysphoria? I guess that's what I understand in my mind as.
Yeah, and I don't mean to say that that's not like a real feeling that people are experiencing, or that it's not negative.
Yeah.
Like, obviously.
Yeah. All I'll say is that when I was in Mormonism, I absolutely felt like pressure to become more feminine, or just like felt like I wasn't feminine enough.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and I wouldn't. I mean, I've struggled with the expectations of being a girl or a woman in various ways throughout my life, and I definitely felt like not as feminine as my peers growing up for various reasons. But I mean, I wouldn't say I'm someone who like has to reckon a lot with gender. And in Mormonism, I felt like not good enough, and I like fit the mold pretty well. But I also didn't, because it's like it was a facade as well.
Just cannot emphasize enough how artificial the gender binary is, because gender, what we talk about, the presentation of these different types of people, has been that enforced artificial binary, but doesn't really encompass everybody that goes along that full spectrum. And I just think it's so absurd. Like, people who claim to worship the God of nature, who never observe nature. Like, you see male seahorses who get pregnant. What do Christians say to that? Like, oh, well, then in that case, God just made males who get pregnant. Okay, if it's that easy for seahorses, then fucking do that for people. There's all kinds of asexual, and I don't mean non-reproductive. I mean reproductive non-sexually. Like, that's a whole different thing that's going on. And there are all types of different gender transitioning organisms that manifest these characteristics at some time and then different times than others. There's homosexuality observed in so many different animal species. There's all kinds of different sexual and mating and relational behaviors that don't fit into the stark ideas that have been imposed on us about our natures, as they've been called. So it's like, if you just look at nature, you see that all of it is way more complex. Why should we be any different? Only because some book that was assembled in the Iron Age had this mythology, and we just have to go along with it for reasons.
My friend was telling me, I'm actually not going to go there because I feel like we need to move on. To those, oh wait, where are we? Okay, basically, Elder Oaks' advice to people who are struggling with issues of confusion of identity is just like, pray to Jesus. That's all he says. It's just like, read the scriptures and he'll guide you, which I feel like we know from how many LGBTQ plus people in the church can tell you that like they didn't get shit out of doing that. But anyway, to those who experience the feeling of being romantically attracted to persons of the same sex, President Oaks noted that if not acted on, such attractions are not sins. That's so murky, though, as well, when you are talking about romance, because you can feel romantic feelings towards like a friend that you don't want to have sex with. Like, and so how do you not act on feelings of romance? Like, if you feel romantic, I don't know. It's like, because it's so innocent, it can be so do you know? It's so weird to even imagine, you know.
I've been romantically.
If I like love you a bit too much one day, then I'm like, shut it down. Because that's not, you know, that's just like. Sorry, what were you saying?
Oh, just own personal experience that I've been romantically attracted to people, you know.
Yeah. My first, he said, if not acted on, it's not a sin. But how do we deal with such feelings in us or in others? The fact that we even have to ask how to deal with it in others, like, it's not really a problem. My first advice is to remember that whatever our own variations in the diversity of our Father in heaven's creations, he loves all of us, and his perfect plan of happiness. Just back to that. Is it just like keep the commandments? Okay.
Again, keep the commandments. These commandments were literally made up by people who owned slaves and thought genocide and rape of war conquests was cool. Like, why should we be taking moral notes from these people? And
Also, when he says the commandments, he means all the arbitrary Mormon rules.
yeah,
it's not
he's
like
not
the
talking about
commandments.
separating fabrics and not eating shellfish, or for not keeping the Sabbath day holy, which was also a capital offense, which means we need to kill all the people who worked on the General Conference broadcasts of this day who still got paid for it. Like, why are we so selective about this specific commandment that Jesus never said a thing about, that wasn't mentioned in the book for our day or by the prophets who saw our day and knew the struggles that we would be having and wrote this just for us? Like, come on. And over something that like isn't harming anyone. Like, two gay people together, how does that hurt you? They're not having kids? Okay, great. You're not having kids either in your old age, Elder Oaks. Like, who cares? Why does it matter to you? It's like, this is, to me, like, I've heard a few LDS people say, like, well, I support gay people. I know that it's not a choice, but aren't we going a little too far? And it's like, this is like when the Catholic Church villainized people for having being left-handed. They said that, like, they even call witchcraft and wizardry the left-handed path, the path of Satan. And they assumed that if you were using the left hand, because it's so unnatural and also associated with right-brain thinking, being more creative and outside the box, that you must be adhering to Satan if you're writing with your left hand. So they banned it. They didn't allow it. And that's like exactly how I feel like when people are like, oh, you shouldn't be allowed to be gay. It's like, why? That's the way I am. And it doesn't hurt anyone. It's just like makes my life. I'm just living in the flow of my life as it is, as I've been created. And it literally doesn't harm you at all.
I think you should eat meat sparingly because God said so, but I don't like to put my nose in other people's business.
We're not going to get an emphasis on that. We get...
By the way, if you want to send us a super chat, but you don't want YouTube to take a third of the money, our Venmo link is in the description box. Just throwing that out there. Okay, little bit of Zelf energy here. President Oaks also echoed counsel from President Nelson to be careful with labels. Oh, I have such an issue with this already. No identifier should displace, replace, or take priority over these three enduring designations: child of God, child of the covenant, and disciple of Jesus Christ. All that is in high control groups, they make you have your cult identity be first and foremost all the time. Because we know that it's not just child of God. Lots of people think they're a child of God but aren't Mormon. But we know that that's not acceptable. I guess that's why they have child of the covenant as well. But again,
and literally every biblical adherer believes themselves to be a child of the covenant.
Like
as well.
those three labels aren't. Like lots of people would call themselves those three things who aren't Mormon, but this is about just making sure that you don't have any identity that supersedes your cult identity, which is standard in all high control groups. Stephen Hassan talked about this a lot when I interviewed him for Mormon Stories. It's in the live section of the Mormon Stories YouTube channel if you're interested in watching that. But yeah, this is just basic cult stuff. Every cult does this. It's not some groundbreaking advice for people dealing with gender dysphoria. It's cults doing their thing. President Nelson also warned any identifier that is not compatible with these three basic designations will ultimately let you down. Yep, there you go.
Again, not that I necessarily think these labels are important or essential, but none of them are mutually exclusive with being gay or being trans. You can still be a child of the covenant or a child of God or a disciple of Jesus Christ and be gay and trans. There's plenty of people who do it. It's literally just you saying you're not allowed to do those things.
Well, it's saying that no other label you have should ever be more important than those. So
okay.
Yeah.
Well, okay.
But it's like if you're trans and like Mormonism is just never like spoke to you or resonated with you and like has only ever made you feel bad,
hate you,
then I'm like, why would you want to have like Mormon be your label before something that like actually speaks to your lived experience? It's just bullshit.
And disciple of Christ, again, Jesus never said a goddamn word about any of this. So if you're truly trying to follow Jesus and do the things that he actually said, you'd probably just ignore this whole thing completely and just love the people, even if you don't understand him, which was the focus of his whole fucking ministry.
And I've never seen Elder Oaks wear a dress like Jesus. So
no, he's a literal Pharisee. What does Jesus talk about? They love sitting in the chief seats and being greeted in the streets by rabbi. It's like, who else literally sits in the chief seats in the great and spacious building and have gotten so many fucking talks about how you have to call them by their proper titles and have proper respect for authority and make sure you're wearing an Armani suit, because if you're just showing up in street clothes, that's disrespectful. You take your fine twine linens and your...
You don't think they wear Armani, do you?
Some do.
The apostles?
Yeah.
Or like Elder Gong?
Yeah.
Other labels will disappoint you in time because they do not have the power to lead you toward life in the celestial kingdom of God. I don't really see labels as needing to lead me towards eternal life. That's a lot of pressure to put on.
Yeah, right. It's like what labels do is help you identify and understand different facets of your personality.
Mm-hmm.
So it's not saying like, all I am is this thing, and that's going to lead me to life and salvation. It's just being like recognizing that like what I am is a compilation of a lot of different things, an intersection of various creative vectors, including my race, including my sexuality, including my orientation and my gender and my theocratic views and whatever. Like those are all parts of it. And he's saying, no, there's only one thing that matters, and that's how much you pay and obey me.
Mm-hmm. And then Sister Oakes concludes by saying, tonight, just like the Israelites, we are under attack for various beliefs we hold
Who's
sacred.
attacking you? Who's attacking you? Name one single piece of legislation that has been aimed to curb your power and ability to express or show up in this world. Like, is there anything who's being like, Mormons shouldn't be allowed to have positions of political influence, shouldn't be allowed to appear in the media. You shouldn't even allow them to welcome to your home because that shows that you're condoning Mormon beliefs and practices. Literally nobody's doing that. Meanwhile, there's been like some 500 new pieces of legislation introduced this year aimed at attacking queer and trans people. Shut up.
I also don't think it's that ridiculous to say that people who believe that a pedophile restored the Church of God should be allowed to hold political office. Like that seems pretty reasonable as a standard of critical thinking in our society. Like if you are part of a religion that like worships a guy who married children, like that's a no from me personally.
I mean, they don't give a shit about that. They're spending their billions of dollars fighting legal battles to make sure that sexual predators don't see justice. Like that's where they're at in this whole thing. Their whole fucking Curtin McConkie policy, who set up the thing where, you know, Bishop, the hotline, the abuse hotline that goes not toward people who are trained to help victims of abuse, but toward the church's liability department so they can assess the potential damage that might be inflicted by the church through some PR nightmare, not actually out of concern for the victims. And meanwhile, the people who actually set up these policies for Curtin and McConkie ended up, you know, who was the guy Pullman who ended up like being found like soliciting an underage person for sex or something like
Gasp.
that. Yeah. Oh, this one is from Ash. Super chat because y'all are so cute and giving me a great conversation to listen to while I finally clean my closet.
Cleaning out your closet, brave.
I'm cleaning
No
out
small
my
task.
closet.
Well, I think that's basically the end of the comments.
What did we learn
not a lot
from
there.
this?
I think mostly what we learned is just like keep being Mormon. But that's what we learn from everything we ever read.
It's like
from these guys.
People these days have a lot of thoughts and concerns, none of which I will address. Just keep following me, the person you have been conditioned from childhood to view as an authority, because I sit in Moses' seat, the chief seats, and call me by my respectful title, Rabbi, because I am in charge. I dictate the law of God and arbitrate the commandments and morality, etc., etc.
Banger. Another banging talk. Also, hi, Ray.
Ray!
Our biggest financier this month.
Earlier when we were talking about softball questions, he was like, how do you guys survive being so thoughtful and beautiful? And I was like, yeah, we get hard questions like this all the time, and it really gets me thinking.
And it really gets me down.
Thank you, Ray. We have a little shrine to you in our hearts.
Yeah,
we'll
we
never
do.
forget.
We've talked about you every time we've seen you since that live stream.
It's Tanner and Osmond.
One bad you have the spirit of that.
Does the whole bunch. Yeah, sure.
Smack the cat.
Yeah, for one last super chat, we'll give Banksy a little treat.
We'll hang around for 2 more minutes to see if any of you want to Venmo us. And we will give Banksy a treat for every one of you that Venmos us.
He did a
and
good
he
job
will
today.
be so happy.
He will.
He did such a good job.
Playing a supportive but important role. Oh, he's precious. Our little animal friends are so sweet. I am just constantly amazed at animals and the way that people have historically understood them. Like, we have neuroscientists, mainstream neuroscientists coming out right now and saying like, oh yeah, of course animals have emotions And it's like, well, duh, haven't you ever watched an animal? But there's like people on planet Earth today who believe that animals just don't have feelings.
Yep.
And it's like, if you just watch an animal for 10 minutes, you'll see that they experience everything that we experience. Like emotionally, they experience anger, jealousy, hunger, lust,
deep grief when they lose members of their family, or deep grief when their young are taken away from them, as they routinely are in the milk and dairy industry, where female cows are forcibly impregnated and then have their young taken away from them, and they just have to constantly grieve because of capitalism. Horrific.
So
Let's eat meat sparingly, guys. Also dairy. Also, thank you, Lee. One bad apple.
I actually was working on a parody for a while that was like, one bad asshole, don't ruin the whole church. Kind of like a Brigham Young. But it turns out it's bad apples all the way down. Bad assholes
all the way down.
Yeah.
Thank you all so much for being here. This ended up, we're trying to keep this to an hour, but
sometimes
when the assholery is
140. Oh yeah, we did not stick to it. Thanks for hanging out with us. Oh, whales. In the 90s, it was all about saving the whales. I believe now the whales are saving us.
No, they're killing us now, which good for them.
I'm joining them. Join the Orca Uprising.
We just got another super chat from Janelle.
Janelle. Thank you.
My phone is about to die before I'm going to be able to read it. Treat for Kitty.
Okay, let's get him a snack. Oh, he knows what's up. He knows. He can smell a super chat. Don Smith said, watch your show with Nemo roasting John D. Laugh so hard. Thank you for the therapy.
Okay, that video where we roasted John Dylan with Nemo is one of my favorites.
I'm going to do more of those.
Yeah, everyone go watch that if you haven't seen it. It's hilarious.
Oh, he's like, wait, more, please.
He's like, but I have hundreds of fans.
Banksy, savor the joy. It's almost like getting the treat gave him more anxiety than not having a treat at all. Which is why I never show love to anyone. That would be like some Elder Oaks logic.
Showing kindness can actually cause irreparable harm to the sons and daughters of God. It is our duty first and foremost to preach the gospel, regardless of the emotional, mental, and social toll it may take on our victims. I mean, siblings in Christ.
The video is called Roasting John Dylan, and I think it's we have a playlist now on our main page called Bangers, which I just put some of our top videos in. That's in there. Anyway, this has been great.
Yeah, thank you all so much.
Love you all. Thanks for all the super chats and Venmos. And now we're going to go over to Patreon and film an episode of Stephanie. Thanks, you did not knock that over.
Banksy got one snack and he's burning this whole thing down. He's going to knock down the lights.
Isn't it Elder Oaks accent? You really are so good. I really think it's a big part of our channel's success. We're going to go read a chapter of a book by a Mormon dad about a drug-addicted Mormon girl teen.
Hey, speaking of impressions and bangers, is the Mormon lip reading on the bangers playlist? It's an old one, but a goodie. If you want to hear a bunch of my General Authority impressions, they're all in a Mormon lip reading. A couple of different Mormon lip reading videos. Anyway.
Yeah. Bye.
Love you, bye.
Go to Patreon. It's going to be really fun. It's going to be fun.
Way more
It's going to be a lot of fun.
This had some that one, all fun.
We're taking this energy, adding to it. You guys get it.
We'll take what joy you have and add to it. See if we can add a little to it. Okay, bye.
Stephanie, bye.
Oh my god, it didn't end. Oh my god. It's like when you pull the trigger and nothing happens.